When I first moved into Lakeview Ridge, a modest condominium complex tucked against the outskirts of a mid-sized American city, I assumed life would be peaceful. Rows of 2- and 3-story buildings stood in neat lines, each with manicured shrubs and uniform brick facades that gave the impression of order and calm. Most residents were friendly in passing, smiling as they took out trash or walked their dogs on the looping paths that circled a small artificial lake. Sure, Lakeview Ridge had its share of politics, like most places with a homeowners association. Dues were collected monthly, covering communal landscaping, small repairs, and the upkeep of a modest clubhouse. Once in a while, the HOA enforced rules about mailbox colors or balcony decorations. But overall, the environment was not oppressive. At least, that was how it seemed before I encountered the one resident who had a knack for stirring up drama and micromanagement. Barbara Karen Arnett. Karen was in her 50s, a woman of medium height with short, precisely styled hair that never seemed ruffled by the wind. She wore suits or pastel sweaters, always pressed, always proper. Ostensibly, she was just another HOA volunteer, yet she acted like the de facto authority on everything. If a piece of your holiday decor wasn't in compliance, you'd wake up to a note from Karen. If your grass was an inch too tall, she'd show up with a tape measure. She loved controlling the narrative of the HOA. Many folks tried to stay on her good side to avoid the headache. For a while, I managed to remain neutral in her eyes. I paid my dues on time, followed the rules about curtain colors, didn't feed birds from my balcony, or commit any such sins. But that uneasy neutrality would soon collapse. My personal life was about to be intruded upon by a scandalous rumor, orchestrated by Karen's cunning. And it all began one chilly February morning when I stepped outside my condo building and spotted a bright, neon green flyer taped to the front door, featuring my name in large letters. I nearly dropped my coffee when I read the text. Vote, my name, for Audit Committee. I promise to root out corruption and keep Lakeview Ridge's finances in line. Experience, integrity, action. At first, I assumed someone was playing a joke. Audit Committee? I was only vaguely aware that the HOA was forming a small subcommittee to review financial statements, something recommended by the main board. But I definitely wasn't running for it. I had no interest in rummaging through receipts or deciphering balance sheets. Yet here was a flyer plastered with my name and a fuzzy headshot that looked suspiciously like it had been pulled from an old social media profile. Underneath the bold text was a bullet list of my achievements, none of which I'd actually done. Things like spearheaded the clubhouse repair initiative or initiated cost-saving measures for landscaping. Lies. Worse yet, at the bottom, it read, "Vote for my name. Lakeview Ridge residents deserve a fighter." I stared at it, both baffled and uneasy. Why would someone claim I was running for an audit committee seat? I glanced around, noticing other identical flyers taped to neighboring building doors inside the elevator, even pinned to the clubhouse bulletin board. Dozens of them, all featuring the same weird promise that I was entering the upcoming HOA subcommittee election. I felt my pulse quicken. Could it be a bizarre prank by some bored neighbor? But who would bother to do this and why? My instincts pointed me toward the one person with a track record of meddling in elections or committees, Karen. She thrived on controlling the HOA's narrative, and the audit committee seat was one of the newly minted positions. If she or one of her allies wanted to ensure a particular candidate won or lost, maybe they'd make a straw candidate, me, to split votes. That suspicion creeped up my spine like a cold chill. Unsure how to proceed, I tore down the flyers near my building entrance and in the elevator, stuffing them into a plastic bag. I then decided to phone the HOA's main office, leaving a voicemail. "Hi, this is my name. I'm calling regarding these flyers that say I'm running for the audit committee. I want to clarify, I am not running. Someone's misusing my identity or posting false material. Please advise." I expected a quick response. But as usual with HOA matters, a few days passed with no official word. During that time, I received multiple texts and knocks on my door from neighbors who'd seen the flyers. They asked if I was serious about exposing corruption. Some seemed supportive, others confused. A few residents had always suspected the board was hiding something in the finances. I politely told each person that I had no involvement and the flyers were fake. One evening, I cornered a more approachable board member, Diane, as she was walking her dog near the lake. "Did you see those flyers claiming I'm running for the Audit Committee?" I asked, exasperated. She nodded sympathetically. "Yes, I noticed. I assumed you changed your mind and jumped into the race last minute. We do need volunteers." I shook my head. "No, I had nothing to do with it. Someone's using my name without permission. I'm worried about how this might affect the real committee election." Diane frowned. "That's odd. The official candidate list is short. Just 2 people, Brian and Alexis. If you were indeed a candidate, you'd have had to fill out forms. Let me check with the board. We certainly don't want fraudulent campaigns." I thanked her, relieved to have an ally. Meanwhile, I scoured the buildings for more flyers, ripping them down wherever I found them. Yet the next morning, new ones appeared. Same design, same neon green paper, plastered on mailboxes and in laundry rooms. This was no casual prank. It was methodical. The talk around Lakeview Ridge grew louder. "Is my name serious about running? Maybe I'll vote for them." The swirling rumors threatened my own credibility. If I abruptly withdrew, some might suspect I was bailing after making big claims. Others might think I was playing politics, try to manipulate the race. Between my own intuition and a bit of gossip from neighbors, I started connecting dots leading to Karen. For one, she'd historically used similar tactics in board elections: rumors, questionable endorsements, to tip the scales in her favor. For another, the flyer's layout style, with big capital letters and exclamation points, reminded me of how Karen authored her official memos, though disguised under a different font. Additionally, the mention of root out corruption was suspiciously vague. The language seemed designed to steal votes from the real candidates who also claimed transparency. If voters were split among multiple transparency candidates, Karen's preferred candidate might gain advantage. Another reason, Karen disliked me personally. I'd had run-ins with her about minor issues, though nothing this big. Maybe she was using me as a pawn to fracture the election field. One detail especially caught my eye. The flyers used cheap glue or paste to stick to surfaces, leaving messy smudges around the edges. The neon paper was from a brand sold at the local craft store. I wondered if I could find a direct link to Karen, like a receipt or something indicating her purchase. It might be a long shot, but I was determined to gather evidence. I decided to confide in a friend, Carla, who also lived in Lakeview Ridge and worked in local journalism. She was no stranger to investigating odd leads. Over coffee, I explained the fiasco. Carla raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "So, you suspect Karen is forging an entire campaign for you, hoping to manipulate the outcome?" "Exactly," I said, sighing. "It's ridiculous, but I can't prove it yet." Carla tapped her chin. "In politics, the best way to expose a forgery is to show proof, like matching the handwriting or linking the materials to the suspect. Maybe we can do some sleuthing. If she used the association printer or left behind a receipt for neon paper, we might catch her." I nodded. "And we can also request a meeting with the board to disclaim any involvement. The last thing I want is to be labeled a quitter or overshadow the legitimate candidates." Carla smiled. "Yes, and if we find a smoking gun connecting Karen to these flyers, we can file a formal complaint. This definitely violates the HOA's code of conduct and possibly local regulations about election fraud." Her eyes sparkled. She loved a good story. "Let's do it." Carla and I embarked on a small amateur investigation. First, we examined several of the flyers in detail, using a magnifying glass to note any unique marks. We found partial fingerprints in the dried glue around the corners, smudges that might match someone's prints if we had them on file. That was more of a law enforcement approach, though, and we didn't want to escalate to calling the police unless absolutely necessary. We also discovered that the text featured a distinctive handwriting style for the small additions at the bottom, like "Keep Lakeview Honest," scrawled in pen. The type portion was done in a typical word processor, but the side note seemed handwritten. It was reminiscent of Karen's scrawls on certain official notices. We took photos, hoping to compare them to known samples of her handwriting, like the notes she'd sometimes taped to doors. If we could show similarities, that might be enough to incriminate her in the eyes of the HOA board. Meanwhile, Carla checked local office supply stores for records of large neon green paper purchases. That might be a stretch, but if Karen used a store loyalty card or placed a big order, there could be a record. No immediate luck, though we found a clerk who recalled a stern-looking lady buying neon paper in bulk last week. The description was vague, but could fit Karen. Not definitive evidence, just a piece of the puzzle. We also rummaged the building's recycling bins, hoping to find discarded scraps or test prints. No such luck, but I did find a half-used glue stick in the hallway trash near the mailroom. Its label matched the smears we saw on the flyers. Possibly left by the culprit, but again, circumstantial. The more we looked, the more I felt we needed a direct approach. Finally, we compiled what we had. Photos of the flyers, the questionable handwriting that matched Karen's style from old memos, partial fingerprint smudges, the store clerk's vague memory. Enough to confront the board or demand a formal inquiry. Possibly. But I also wanted to give the legitimate candidates, Brian and Alexis, a heads up so they'd know I wasn't part of some bizarre sabotage plot. Word spread that I disavowed the flyers and suspected they were fake. Some residents believed me. Others remained unsure, thinking I might be pulling a stunt. The confusion only grew. The real candidate, Brian, approached me outside the clubhouse. "Hey, I heard you're not actually running. People keep asking me if we're teaming up. This is messing with the election." He looked frustrated. I apologized, insisting I had no role. He sighed. "Well, if you find out who's behind it, let me know. This kind of trick is exactly why the HOA has such a bad rep." Meanwhile, Alexis, the other candidate, posted a statement on the community forum, urging residents not to be fooled by false campaigns. She wrote, "Let's keep this election honest. If a candidate doesn't appear at candidate forums or official ballots, they aren't legitimate." That helped clarify to many that I wasn't a real contender. But one surprising reaction came from neighbors who disliked the board's status quo. They said, "We'd vote for my name because we want an outsider to truly root out corruption." Some pressed me to actually run, arguing that, ironically, the hoax gave me popularity. I politely declined. I had no interest in the job or the drama. All I wanted was to clear my name and find out who orchestrated this fiasco. One morning, as if to stoke the fire further, new flyers appeared, this time typed entirely, featuring an even more outlandish platform. They read, "My name demands a complete overhaul of Lakeview finances. No more hidden fees, no more shady deals. Join the revolution." Join the revolution? That was definitely not my style of language. Some neighbors found it hilarious, but others worried about the level of agitation it implied. The entire building seemed fixated on the fake campaign. Tensions flared on the community forum. Real candidates, Brian and Alexis, lost the spotlight to this bizarre soap opera. In frustration, I emailed the HOA board, CCing all members, including Karen, to request an urgent meeting to address the identity misuse. I attached photos of the flyers, my disclaimers, and the partial evidence. Karen responded with a short note. "We will consider your concerns at the next scheduled meeting." She made no effort to reassure me or condemn the hoax. That further fueled my suspicion that she was behind it. At that point, I decided enough was enough. I needed a direct confrontation or a more ironclad piece of evidence. Carla suggested we quietly check the HOA's office or wherever Karen might store supplies. Possibly, she'd left behind test prints or packaging for the neon paper. But that might cross a line into trespassing. Instead, we bided our time, waiting for a break. Our breakthrough came almost by accident. One afternoon, while retrieving my mail in the lobby, I noticed a single flyer had fallen behind the trash bin. It had slightly different text. The lines at the top were typed, but at the bottom was a snippet scrawled in pen. "Guaranteed to fix financial woes. All details soon." It included a small smear of glue and, quite visibly, a partial fingerprint in that glue. Usually, that would be worthless without official forensic tests. But the print looked distinct, and the pen note was in a style reminiscent of Karen's scribbles on old HOA notes. I'd collected a few of those notes over the past year. Times she'd left me warnings about bin placement or yard items. Some had her signature with a swirl, sometimes accompanied by small side remarks in the margins. The handwriting had the same slanted letters, the same spacing quirks. Carla suggested we take high-resolution photos and do a side-by-side comparison. We found an identical swirl on a letter G, matching how Karen typically wrote her G in cursive. We also noticed that the fingerprint swirl pattern, though we weren't experts, had a strong similarity to prints Karen left on a certain official form once pinned to a public board. Someone had joked about her greasy fingerprint visible on the corner. She was known to handle papers with bare hands. This was still circumstantial, but it further strengthened the suspicion that she was behind the flyers. Carla and I prepared a small digital collage of evidence. 1. The flyer with a note and partial print. 2. Photographs of Karen's old notes showing matching handwriting. 3. A close-up of her known finger smudge from that official form. We compiled it all into a PDF. Our plan was to present it at the upcoming HOA board meeting. If that didn't force them to investigate, nothing would. The monthly board meeting loomed, and I asked for a spot on the agenda to discuss misuse of identity and election fraud. Word of the confrontation spread, prompting a bigger-than-usual turnout. The real candidates for the Audit Committee, Brian and Alexis, also showed interest. They wanted clarity on the false campaign overshadowing their legitimate run. I was nervous. Karen was known to be cunning, possibly ready to deny or deflect. But I had the advantage of an audience sympathetic to the absurdity of the flyers. On the day of the meeting, Carla accompanied me for moral support. We arrived early to set up a laptop and small projector in the community hall. The board members trickled in. Stuart, the mild president. Linda, the quiet secretary. Travis, the property manager liaison. And Karen, decked in a pastel blazer, hair immaculate, carrying a bulging folder. She avoided eye contact with me. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. At 7 p.m., Stuart called the meeting to order, going through routine business, landscaping updates, maintenance issues, etc. Then we reached the item labeled Identity Misuse Concern. Stuart nodded at me. "You have the floor," my name. Heart pounding, I stood, advanced to the front of the room, and began. "Thank you. I'm here to address the flyers that falsely claim I'm running for the Audit Committee. I want everyone to know I had no involvement. This campaign was fabricated. It's caused confusion and overshadowed real candidates. I suspect it's a deliberate attempt to manipulate the election." Some in the audience murmured agreement. I continued. "I've gathered evidence suggesting that these flyers were posted by Ms. Arnett." A collective hush fell. Karen stiffened. I pressed on. "I'll show how the handwriting matches her known notes, plus a partial fingerprint in the glue that seems to match smudges from her official memos. While not a scientific test, the similarities are quite strong. Also, there's a store clerk who recalls a woman matching her description buying neon green paper. In short, we have reason to believe Ms. Arnett orchestrated this forgery for political reasons." Karen abruptly rose, her voice icy. "That's absurd. You have no real proof, just speculation and rummaging for scraps." She glared. "I had nothing to do with your ridiculous campaign. Are you sure you're not forging these to gain attention? Or to blame me because you have a grudge?" I scowled. "That's nonsense, Karen. I don't want any seat. You, on the other hand, do have a motive to split votes or discredit me for speaking out about board issues." She opened her mouth to retort, but I motioned to Carla, who brought up slides on the projector. The first slide displayed high-resolution photos of multiple flyers, highlighting the hand-pen scribbles. The second showed samples from Karen's old notes, the same slant, similar loops on letters, especially the letter G and Y. Next, I showed an enlarged image of the partial fingerprint smudge, side by side with a known print from Karen's official memo left behind months ago. The swirl patterns, while not definitive, appeared strikingly alike. The room buzzed with curiosity. I concluded by displaying a photograph of the neon paper brand and the local store clerk statement about a stern, short-haired woman purchasing bright neon green reams days before the flyers appeared. Again, I said, this is circumstantial, but all roads lead to Ms. Arnett. Moreover, if she is truly innocent, I'd ask, who else has the motive and the opportunity? The only person who benefits from sowing confusion is someone deeply involved in HOA politics. Karen flushed red, eyes darting around. She tried to retake control. This is slander. You can't prove it's my handwriting. And even if we use the same brand of paper, that means nothing. Anyone could buy neon green. This entire display is a smear campaign. Stewart, looking rattled, turned to Karen. You are the board liaison for elections, correct? You had direct oversight of the candidate registration. Did you see any sign that my name submitted an application? Karen pressed her lips. No, of course not. I never claimed they did. The official candidate list is Brian and Alexis. The flyers must be some malicious trick by a third party. She glanced at me. He could be staging it himself, or it could be a disgruntled neighbor. There's no direct evidence. These handwriting similarities are subjective. I responded, why would I sabotage my own reputation with a false run? That makes zero sense. Meanwhile, you have a track record of meddling in HOA affairs. Our own board meeting minutes show how controlling you are about elections. An older resident, Ms. Young, chimed in from the audience. This isn't the first time we've seen shady tactics near election time. Karen, you once distributed strange rumor letters about Bill Thompson's finances back in the day. Many suspected you typed them. Now we see a pattern. Karen tried to maintain composure, but was clearly rattled. The audience smelled blood. Another neighbor said, if you're innocent, why not provide a sample of your handwriting so we can compare? She retorted that it was a violation of her privacy. People scoffed. Stewart sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. All right, let's maintain order. We can't hold a full forensic trial here, but the evidence is compelling. The board can vote on a formal censure or investigation if we feel Ms. Arnett has engaged in unethical conduct. The room muttered in tense anticipation. The board took a brief recess to confer privately while the rest of us waited. The tension was thick. I overheard residents whisper that the forged flyers clearly had Karen's fingerprints all over them. Another suggested we demand she step down from the election oversight role. Meanwhile, Karen stood alone by a corner, arms crossed, occasionally shooting me daggers with her gaze. After about 10 minutes, the board returned. Stewart, looking grim, addressed the group. We, the board, have reviewed the evidence provided by my name. We acknowledge that it strongly suggests Ms. Arnett's involvement in distributing false campaign materials. In the absence of a conclusive forensic test, we cannot definitively prove guilt beyond doubt. However, the parallels in handwriting, the fingerprint in the glue, and the suspicious circumstances are troubling. He paused, glancing at Karen. Ms. Arnett, do you wish to produce any evidence disproving these allegations or an alibi of some sort? A statement of your whereabouts during the flyer postings? Karen stiffened. I don't need an alibi. These accusations are baseless. I wasn't skulking around the buildings at odd hours. I was home or out running errands. This entire fiasco is a personal vendetta. She glared my way, lips tight. Stewart nodded slowly. Given the weight of these allegations and your position as an HOA officer, we find cause for a formal reprimand. We also will remove you from any involvement in the election process to avoid further suspicion. The board will notify our membership that the flyers regarding my name were unauthorized and misleading. We encourage residents to disregard them. A wave of relief and hushed cheers spread through the audience. Karen looked outraged, her face coloring. You can't do that. I've served this board faithfully for years. This is humiliating. Linda, the secretary, spoke gently but firmly. We can and must, Karen. Even if you're not proven guilty, the appearance of impropriety is too strong. It undermines trust in the HOA. She tapped some papers. The board will file an official letter of reprimand in your record. If further evidence emerges, we may consider more severe action. For now, you're relieved of election duties. Our property manager will take over that role. Karen's shoulders sagged. Fury blazing in her eyes. But she said nothing. The audience watched in stunned silence, absorbing the moment. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed out, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. The door slammed behind her. The hush broke into murmurs. Some folks approached me to shake my hand, congratulating me on clearing my name. Others expressed relief that the suspicious flyers were denounced. In the days after the meeting, the HOA sent an official newsletter. Notice, the flyers purporting that my name is running for the Audit Committee are fraudulent. The board confirms that my name is not a candidate. We urge residents to disregard any references. Furthermore, due to concerns about improper campaign activities, Ms. Barbara Arnett will no longer oversee the election. We are committed to a fair, transparent process. The fiasco effectively ended. The real candidates, Brian and Alexis, resumed normal campaigning. I reaped the benefits of that notice. My name was cleared, and the community recognized I was a victim of Karen's scheme. Some joked that if I ever truly ran for a position, I'd probably win on sympathy alone. I laughed it off. The last thing I wanted was deeper involvement in the messy HOA politics. As for Karen, she lost significant credibility. Though she kept her seat on the board, she was sidelined from major decisions. Many neighbors saw her as unscrupulous, willing to forge an entire campaign. She kept a low profile for a while, presumably licking her wounds. The official reprimand might not have kicked her out, but it severely tarnished her standing. The gossip around the complex soared. Some dubbed her Fraud Karen, a nickname that stuck in hushed circles. Meanwhile, the election proceeded without further drama. Brian ended up winning the Audit Committee seat. Alexis took a role on a smaller finance subcommittee. Both seemed eager to do real oversight. If anything, Karen's sabotage attempt only galvanized them to show the community they wouldn't be intimidated by underhanded tactics. Weeks later, something unexpected occurred. A typed letter slipped under my door, evidently from Karen. It bore no signature, but the tone was clearly hers. I maintain that you and certain board members orchestrated a smear against me. My only error was trying to ensure the election had multiple voices. The method may have been misguided. I regret how it affected your reputation, though I never intended to harm you personally. Perhaps in the future, you'll see that not all actions are black and white. I accept my reprimand for now. B.A. I read it thrice, perplexed by its half apology, half accusation. She denied direct guilt, but admitted she may have been misguided. Did that count as a confession? Hardly, but it hinted at her underlying motive, ensuring multiple voices. She likely tried to create a faux candidate, me, to peel away votes from Brian or Alexis. In her twisted logic, maybe she believed she was balancing the race. Or perhaps she was just preserving her allies' chances. I decided not to respond. The fiasco was done. My name was cleared. Karen was officially reprimanded. And ironically, the fiasco had spurred the community to unify against shady tactics, giving the real Audit Committee a strong mandate. That was enough for me. With the election final and Karen effectively neutralized from further meddling, Lakeview Ridge found a sense of calm. The new Audit Committee performed a thorough review, discovering only minor budget inefficiencies, no grand corruption. They implemented small reforms to ensure better transparency, making it less likely that someone like Karen could exploit confusion in the future. Neighbors often asked me how it felt to be the accidental candidate. I joked that I was probably the only person in HOA history to run for a seat without even knowing it. If anything, the experience taught me the importance of paying attention to local governance. Even small elections can be manipulated if no one's watching. At least we had a system, though imperfect, that allowed me to challenge wrongdoing. Karen, still an HOA board member, showed up at monthly meetings but rarely spoke. The real power now resided with others. She'd lost her aura of unstoppable authority. Some suspected she might quietly resign in the next term. But the brand of hoax flyer scandal would forever stain her name in Lakeview Ridge lore. I found a quiet satisfaction in the final outcome. I never wanted to be a hero or a political figure, but by standing up for the truth, I'd help keep the election honest. My neighbors recognized that. The forged flyers vanished from memory, replaced by an anecdote of how not to attempt election meddling in a suburban condo association. And so it ended. Karen's misguided scheme to manipulate an HOA subcommittee election by forging a campaign in my name was exposed, culminating in her official reprimand. She lost face, the actual candidates carried on, and I reclaimed my reputation. The community learned a valuable lesson about vigilance and fair process. In the calm afterwards, we settled back into the ordinary routines of suburban life. Except now, we did so with a sharper eye for shady politics, determined never again to be blindsided by the flamboyant illusions of a self-styled Karen. Ultimately, the fiasco had a happy ending. The real election remained untainted. Karen's fraud was called out, and I walked away without the dreaded burden of an audit committee seat, free from the manipulations that nearly thrust me into a position I never wanted. The sweet relief of normalcy returned to Lakeview Ridge, ensuring that neighborly barbecues and quiet evenings by the lake took precedence over cunning political trickery. It was, in its own strange way, a victory for integrity and a reminder that sometimes the best defense against pettiness is shining a bright spotlight on it for all to see. And that, truly, was a fulfilling conclusion to the bizarre tale of a forged campaign that never was.